So welcome today. I have the pleasure of introducing Stephen Piper, who I get to work with. He is on the board of the Rhode Island Hub, Innovation Hub, so RISUW, and our board is very involved and working hard with us all the time. It's a pleasure to work with him. He is not only an accomplished and innovative executive, he's been with IBM for 21 years. Wow, that's awesome. But little known fact, I mean, he's kind of worked in many areas of IBM and knows pretty much everything there is to know there. He's a change leader. He's also recently been part of the Leadership for Rhode Island group, which is really cool. But he also actually has, I think, a degree in music from, as you know, he went to Brown University, but he also has a degree in music from Hobart. So pretty cool. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Stephen, and you can get us rolling here. And thank you again for everybody joining us.
Thank you very much. And to any of the IBMers on the phone, I do not know everything about IBM, just my little patch. But thank you very much, Annette. I am psyched to be here today, and I'm psyched to have all of you here. This is an exciting week in Rhode Island for RISUW and for innovators and for entrepreneurs and for enterprise. It's exciting to be an innovator in Rhode Island because we are hopping with cool projects right now, of which IBM is a part of them, but also just seeing all of the entrepreneurs and startups coming through the state, seeing all these amazing, cool ideas bubbling up to the surface. So it's a really energizing week just to be a part of this startup week. So we've got a cool conversation today, a couple of real superstars on the topic of blockchain that I'm going to introduce in just a minute. I want to keep this really engaged, though. So we've got a lot of folks on the calls from multiple industries and academics and different parts of the state. And I want to make sure that we stay engaged here with you. So feel free, everybody, to put questions in the chat as we go through. And then we're going to start with a poll that, Jenny, I'll ask you to put up. And as we get into this idea of charting your course in blockchain, I'd like to start with the poll that we can revisit over the course of the next 90 minutes. And that poll question is, what is your familiarity with blockchain in your industry, in your business, in your personal life? And the questions are not familiar, somewhat, and vary. So we'll give that just a minute. We'll give that maybe a couple seconds, see how that goes. And as we're getting those results, I'm going to set up our first speaker, who is my friend and my colleague from IBM, Jason Kelly. Jason is a managing partner and general manager of global strategic partnerships, and is also just a blockchain superstar. And I'm really, really happy to have Jason here today. Let me set up your first chart here, Jason, your only chart, and ask you, if you would, can you set the stage for us today in charting your course in blockchain?
Sure. Well, first to all the attendees here, and I think if I'm staring at, you might want to go to full screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Thank you for passing it over, and welcome to the many people who have taken the time to join today. I've just got a few minutes here, and I'm honored and humbled to be here with such a wonderful group of technologists, business leaders, consultants, and colleagues. So I guess I want to start this off, and that's what Stephen's asked me to do, just jump in with this thought of, charting your path to blockchain. This picture is a picture that goes way back. As if you look at it, you go, okay, traditional supply chain, value chain, as it's called, it says nothing on here about blockchain. So hold the thought on, this is something that's been around forever. The thought of starting with production on one end of a process, and then literally through that process, we as consumers consume something. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now let's jump all the way to this thing that's called blockchain. The big buzzword, full of hype, always has been. And if we think blockchain is the focus, we're wrong. Take that out and just think of where we were when this was a big deal, when this word really, caused a lot of questions. That was the past, when people were saying, both the what, what is blockchain? The famous question, please, in 1 minute, can you tell me what blockchain is? And then after that, it was, well, then how does it work? And can you do that in 30 seconds? And everyone's heads would explode. Oh, goodness, I can't. And then all the buzzwords and all these things would drop out. No one could figure out what it was. And then finally, we got to what makes sense. No one flips a light switch and asks you, how does that light coming out of that bulb when you hit that switch? And when you jump on your phone, which all of you did at some point today already, click, 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 you didn't go, how is this message going to that person and coming back again? How did I just buy way too many things on Amazon that I really don't need? You didn't ask yourself that. You just wanted to see when are the packages getting here? That's where we're at with this buzzword called blockchain. It's not the thought of the what and how. We're where. Where does it make sense? Where does it make sense to use this capability? And what is that capability? It's where do you need unquestionable shared data? Because at the center of all of this is just the data. And that's what it's always been. And so we're at this point where we're saying, look, it's just, where do I want to make sure that I can share data about something, someone, or some process, and know that it's being shared securely, and know that when it's shared, that it is the right data. That's it. And when people say, well, when and where, could you give me an example? It's always use case. Well, we're living in a use case right now. And I'm sure that as we have Anouk Brumfeld talk to us in just a little while, she's going to talk about some of these real life examples of what this means, especially in the current situation around a pandemic. But let me make it even more basic than that, so that as those examples come out, we're all saying, okay, I get it. I get what we mean when we say, oh, we need unquestionable data. And that's then where this one little slide comes in. Graphics always help if they can, if I can save you 1,000 words and put it in a picture, then maybe we'll do just that. On the slide that you have in front of you, if you go from right to left as you're looking at it, there's always a source. There's a source of content or capability, service, or product that we all consume as consumers. And if we were in a room, all of us, and I said, raise your hand if you eat food, I think everybody would raise their hand. Right? No one, if you don't, then I'm not really sure. But anyway, we would, because that's something that we all consume. And there's, we always hear this farm to fork, all those wonderful things. Well, things are produced one place. And if you follow this little picture here, think of food as being produced someplace, and then we make sure that it's safe and it's what it's supposed to be. And then there might be packaging or manufacturing to put it into another product. Say if it was tomatoes into pizza with the meats, and so it's all combined into one thing. It's packaged, processed, distributed, and ultimately it gets to us. Now, think of each one of those steps as a handshake, because there's trust in there. There's this thought that I trust that it was produced where it was produced, and it is what it is. And there's regulation and compliance, another handshake. Then it's manufactured. So now we pass it. All these handshakes are really handshakes of trust, because there's a trust of the data. Is that food really that food? Did it come from where it came from? Was it kept at the right temperature? And then as it went through processing, is it really what we think it is? Because it's a small fact, and we've used this for years now, there's more organic food consumed that is produced every year. So go figure that one, right? So that says that maybe we aren't always consuming those things that we think we're consuming. We can think about all the food scares that have happened over the years. Ultimately, we trust what we get. We think we do, or at least we pay extra for it because we want to. And when it gets to us, there's certain things that we pay for. We say, look, I will pay you. Our price for all that is to make sure that it got to me effectively, that in the end, I'm going to have a great experience. Oh, and that it was sourced responsibly. Oh, and also, if it is this brand, I want to make sure it's that brand. All of these things are based on trust. That trust is based on data. And so isn't it great now that we have this capability that can allow us to trust all this data and share it from source to our consumption without paying for all of these handshakes? There's the example. This is the moment where it's like the music that was playing when you got on. This is when the beat drops and you start dancing in the middle, right? It's like, I got it. This is the beat drop for blockchain, where you say, oh, I don't have to pay all these people to shake hands to make sure it is what I think it is and that it got where it needed to go and that I can consume it with trust. That's right. Now you can consider all those handshakes as this little red dotted line. It's waste. It's wasted time. It's wasted cost. It's wasted old school security, and sometimes it's risk. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some needs still to have these handshakes. So we're not getting rid of everything. We're just saying now we can reduce it if we can share data with trust. That's it. That's the magic of what we have. And then you say, well, if it's so magic and it's so cool, then why isn't it everywhere? And then you start questioning human practice. And that's why we are where we are. You think of, give two examples and then I'll close out here. We think of one example, internet. I talked about the phone, TCP/IP, the internet protocol, right? 30 years. It took 30 years before 1995, we were ready to use it for business. And we go, are you kidding me? Even better. I finally gave into I think I'm going to have a cleaner way to get from point A to point B. So I made the big investment of an EV. I get in the car, my kids are in the car and they're like, oh, Dad, this is really cool, this new technology. I said, all right. And my kids are very coin operated. I go, $50 to whomever can tell me when the first EV was ready. And of course, I'm sitting there and they're all jumping at it and they're like trying to get on their phones. I said, phone's down. Just tell me what you think. Okay, Dad, it was the 1990s, way back in the 1990s. And if you're like me, I'm like, wait a minute, it's not that far back. But anyway, today, way back then. So they all bet and they all picked years in the 90s because someone had anchored it. My youngest had anchored it in the 90s. And so they all picked these. 100 years prior, in the 1890s, the first EV was not invented in Belgium. It was actually the first Belgian EV reached over 60 miles per hour. 1890s. And now here we are now, and I'm just excited that I have one and I'm not burning fossil fuels. How crazy is that? What's the challenge? Adoption, use, not necessarily understanding, but bringing it into the mainstream because it's change. And now we've been forced into an environment where we're ready to accept change. Change is easier when you have to take it, when you have to consume things digitally, when you have to walk into a restaurant and you go, maybe I don't want to touch that menu. And when you're saying, oh, well, I'm not going to go out into a crowd of many, maybe I'll just do it on my computer. How do you trust these things now that we're at more than an arm's distance? Well, we start to then elevate three things. And these are the three things that I'll close on as I pass it back to Steve. Is that you want to make sure that you have provenance, identity, and tokenization. And I usually say it the opposite so that we can use the acronym. Tokenization, people start thinking Bitcoin, forget that. Tokenization just means taking what's physical and making it digital. You tokenize it. And first you want to say, look, can I do that? Can I do that with an identity? With a validate, we're in the US here, so let's talk CDC card. I went into a concert of tens and thousands of people a couple of weeks ago in Austin city limits, if you're a Texas or Austin fan, and they asked for a copy of my CDC card. They didn't ask the name, they didn't ask for my ID. I just showed them a picture of one. Is that really tokenization? How can we really make sure that it was my card and it was me? Well, first, that card had way more data than I wanted them to see. So it was a quick flash and pull away. Why couldn't it have been a QR code? That is what we have to focus on, is that tokenization, because identity, the second letter here, is what I want to make sure that everyone gets, is that they just need to know yes or no on a COVID test or a COVID shot. They don't need to know where I live. They don't need to know how old I am. They don't need to know my blood type. They don't need yes or no. That's it. So how do I manage that identity with trust? And then finally, provenance. For me, when I got the jab, or both jabs in my case, I wanted to make sure that was safe. How do I know that it was kept at the right temperature? How do I know the provenance, the origin of that all the way to me? Organization, identity, provenance. Three things that this capability delivers with trust and certainty. And that's what you'll be talking about today on your journey to blockchain and its capability. So think about that journey of how do you get those three things? And let's not make this a 100-year journey on our talk today. or even a 30-year journey. Let's make it as quick and as fast as possible, but to get the outcome and results that we're looking for. Stephen, thanks for the time. Thanks for the honor of being able to do this intro, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day. Back over to you.
Thanks so much for your time, man. That was great. I really appreciate the setup, and what a great place to start, which is not what, but why. And we're having this conversation with why blockchain. And I know that I recognize a bunch of the industries on the call today. So I will share one story with the construction industry. But that why of blockchain is so important. And as we've all seen in the last 20 months, really, the speed of innovation and the speed of transformation in our companies has just been thrust upon us with COVID. So Jason referred to a few times, like, you know, the speed at which you need a digital copy of something, the speed at which you need to actually innovate and change the way you interact with either people or organizations. That was a 20-year, 10 to 20-year digital transformation that took place overnight out of necessity. So why the trust, and also why this moment? Because the speed of transformation is speeding up so much. One more point on the provenance and identity and tokenization. I was speaking to my friend Eric Sanford, who's a colleague of mine from DeMayo Construction, and also a teammate of mine on Leadership Rhode Island. And we were talking about the construction industry, and in talking about a use case, which I'll introduce Anouk Broomfield in just a minute to go through a few use cases. The blockchain, one of the blockchain use cases in the construction industry is so crystal clear. And this was my beat drop for blockchain in this industry. And it's an industry I don't know very well, but it's the provenance, identity, and tokenization was so crystal clear. In big construction projects, when you create a master plan, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, that master plan is a physical document that is literally printed out, and then notes are taken on that physical document. So the provenance is paper. The provenance is the architecture firm. The identity then becomes a paper document, and that tokenization just gets passed on and on and on. So if you have changes 2 months, 2 years, 3 years down the line, you break that chain, and that trust has now been broken for all of the suppliers and everybody else. So having a trusted digital provenance, identity and token for that document is just so vital. So that was one example that I thought really resonated. So before I introduce our next speaker, Anouk Broomfield, I want to take a moment and pose another question. So this isn't a poll, this is a question that we can just monitor in the chat, which is, can you share with us what projects you have going on? So what are the types of projects you have going on in your business or industry? And these are sort of shared use cases that are going on in the state of Rhode Island or surrounding areas. And I think that will be a useful discussion, useful input as we get through the rest of the morning here. So as we're getting that chat loaded up, I want to introduce Anouk Broomfield. Anouk is the Global Business Services Leader at IBM in blockchain. We've worked together now in 2 separate roles at IBM, and I'm delighted to introduce her and have her here today to talk about getting a little deeper into the business cases that she's seen in her experiences. So Anouk.
All right, Stephen, thank you so much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. I am super excited to be with you all today. And as Stephen introduced, I am the new IBM blockchain leader. Jason spent some time talking about the basics of blockchain. And overall, in a nutshell, blockchain is simply about trust, and it's about transparency. Right now, the world pandemic has accelerated the need for digital transformation. And now more than ever, clients are thinking and operating very differently with trusted data at the core. Blockchain removes friction, it builds trust, and it unlocks new values across all industries. Blockchain helps to digitize business, and blockchain helps to digitize identity. So what I would like to do in the next several minutes, I want to take you each on a quick journey with me so you can see the power of blockchain. You can see the power of this real blockchain that Jason mentioned. And on this journey, I will use a few key pictures, since pictures can tell you 1,000 words, to help make blockchain real for you. And you can see the challenges that we're solving with our clients across industries today. So how many of you all like coffee? Okay, so if you can either, oh, thanks for that cup, Stephen. So you can either give me a thumbs up or you can wave in the Zoom. But I bet we even have some people that says, don't talk to me at all before I have my cup of coffee. But no matter what side you're on, because I'm personally not a coffee drinker, but I still think that with this example, I can show you blockchain in action in the work we're delivering with Folgers 1850 coffee brand right now. This is a real example of how we have blockchain in action. So there is a picture of an average bag of Folgers coffee on the screen that you might have bought from your local grocery store or maybe even on Amazon. So let's go ahead and grab our cell phones. I'm quite sure everyone has their cell phones available. Let's get your cell phone out. Okay. So now if you can go into your camera setting on your phone. Are we there? Now I want you to hover over the QR code of that coffee bag. And what it does is it opens up into something called Thank My Farmer app. And exactly what you're looking at is your coffee's entire journey from the farm to your table. It's that provenance. With Thank My Farmer, you can actually see where that coffee came from and who was a part of the effort to bring that product to our country and to your local retail location. Furthermore, if you like that cup of coffee, you could even contribute directly to the community efforts in the region that actually benefits the farmer who grew your coffee beans, and know that your money actually got there and to see how your money is being used. This new supply chain insight, ecosystem transparency, and sustainability trust is one very real example of what Powered by Blockchain can do for your business around the world. Isn't that pretty cool?
That's very cool.
We know from our 2020 IBM Institute for Business Value report, nearly 57% of consumers are willing to change their purchasing habits to help reduce negative environmental impact. And it's not enough to say, trust me, I'm doing the right things. There is this new growing contingent on consumers saying, prove it. That's why we have hundreds of partners that have joined our initiatives like Food Trust and Trade Lens to set the pace for this ever so evolution. Stephen talked about construction companies earlier, so I'll dive in a bit more because I think we might have a construction company or two with us today, right, Stephen?
I think so, yeah.
So we are working with the United States Endowment for Forestry and Communities using the same kind of Powered by Blockchain capability for lumber provenance to go after illegal logging and other significant social and environmental issues in this space. What could you do with this type of trust in your business and with your clients? Imagine the possibilities. It's really about that trust and transparency. So now let's look at another picture on the screen. Let's look at the guy with his mask on. We all know that we're in this whole COVID disruption. So speaking of trust, we've seen a decade's worth of digitalization that's happening with COVID. Stephen Colbert, I think, says it's best that these last few weeks have been a strange 10 years. I know for many of us, these last 18 months have been really, really challenging. And it's been so strange. It's been like a decade, actually, right? However, there's some incredible work happening as a result of these new partnerships and automations that's taking place in public and private. And we're really on a great path here at IBM. Together with governments around the world and leading partners like CVS. Is CVS here today? I think CVS is here as well, right?
I'm not sure of everybody. I'm not sure of all the participants, but let's assume so. A lot of the large enterprises of Rhode Island are here. So,
good deal. Because today we're working and tackling challenges together. So let's talk about one example where we worked with New York State to help them reopen businesses, leveraging our Powered by Blockchain capability. where it helps to issue vaccine credentials without sharing any personal information. Like Jason kind of talked about, you don't want to share too much personal information. He just needed to show that he was vaccinated to get into a game. So basically with New York State, we've helped without sharing personal information, what's laying the foundation of the future for digital credentials overall. And now we're expanding with driver's license, fishing license, academic credentials, you name it. So what's next is work we're now doing around the world, but particularly in the United States, around helping employers to verify vaccine credentials. You may say, well, isn't that binary? Either you got your shots or you didn't, but it's actually not that simple, is what we're finding out. Different states and different countries and different companies have their own criteria of what they would accept as verified. Some are only accepting if you only have both shots being Pfizer. Some are accepting mixed. You can have one Pfizer, one Moderna, things like that. So what we're trying to do is you'll see the complexity come to life more as we all return to work and as borders are reopening and people start to travel more. How can organizations really prevent fraud in this area? I was watching the news talking about how people are selling vaccination cards. So with blockchain, we can help to prevent fraud in this area. So what I really want you to see that if you do the same thing that we hovered over the coffee QR code, you can do the same thing with the other QR code that you see on the screen with the guy with the mask. And it will show you what we're doing around digital health pass in this space and where we're going next. Really, really cool stuff. So let's look at the next picture and let's go into the financial markets. Let's talk about that for a second. It's not only significant with COVID, the big shift that we've seen a seismic shift in the financial market over the last many months as money pours into the space in growth areas like tokenization, specifically digital assets and trade finance. And we're leading the way in several areas, as well as like central bank digital currency, which we've been an incredible hot topic for those of you in the banking here today know very well. In fact, you'll see some exciting announcements from us at IBM shortly about new work we're leading in Europe and what we're doing on the payment side of the house powered by blockchain. Simplification, automated compliance, and faster settlements are just some of the reasons that the majority of banks today have invested in some type of blockchain work since 2018. One quick example is the work we're doing with WeTrade today with over a dozen banks globally. What business problems are we solving? Banks, as we all know, have traditionally been facilitators of trade deals, working as intermediaries and providing financing for transactions. However, many of the processes around trade finance are either not scalable for banks, or they're too complicated or too costly for the majority of small and medium-sized enterprise companies, leaving almost 70% of global small and medium-sized enterprises without access to trade finance services. In the world today, we have $1.5 trillion of trade finance gap, where small and medium-sized enterprises are the growth engine for GDP. We're working with WeTrade to transform this model powered by blockchain. Wow, some exciting examples across industries. I'll close with this last example with Home Depot. We help the Home Depot client drive visibility across the supply chain and resolve disputes quickly, and basically drive supplier collaboration. Before our solution, the client had blind spots and it was sometimes taking months to resolve. IBM blockchain technology provides the real-time visibility, and if a variance occurred at any stopping point on the supply chain, both the Home Depot and its vendors can address the issues right away. Being able to quickly identify where the problem began allows the retailer and suppliers flexibility in handling situations. By design, blockchain creates a permanent, unchangeable record of a real-time data. So no one can alter or remove it. Role-based access means the vendors can see only what they need to see. No other vendor is going to be able to see another vendor's information. So at this point, I would like to thank each of you for going on this journey with me. Hopefully you can see the power of real blockchain and how we're solving business problems and driving business outcomes for clients across industries. There is so much happening in this ecospace today. I've touched on the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much more. So again, you can always feel free to reach out to Stephen or I, and we can talk more about blockchain and what your needs are and how we can help you. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anouk. That's great context and a great view of the what of blockchain and what we're seeing from an industry perspective and the clients that we're working with and the impact of blockchain in these industries. Before we get to our next speaker, which is going to, we'll then get very local to Rhode Island, I want to take a minute. I see that there's some stuff in the chat, and I want to ask Jenny or Tina if there's anything specific, because I have not been monitoring the chat, if there's anything specific for Anouk or Jason or me that we could get answer now before we get really hyper local into Rhode Island.
Stephen, no, there's no specific questions, just some people sharing some projects that they're working on to answer the question. Tokenization for, well, do you want those now, or are we going to see?
No, if there's any questions that are relevant for right now, we'll take them. If not, let's just keep on moving on. And for all participants here, everybody on the audience, feel free again to pose questions to the IBM team or to our next speaker. And actually, let me ask another question before we get into our next speaker. So we've talked about the why, Anouk talked about the what, and we've started to set up a view of blockchain in our region. And by asking the questions, what familiarity do you have? What projects do you have going on? Next, I'd like to ask what challenges. So if you're engaged in a blockchain project or an initiative, what challenges are you facing? And while we're answering those questions and getting some feedback in the chat, and all of this is a really good setup for our Q&A at the end here, I want to introduce Liz Tanner. So Liz is the Director of Business Regulations for the state of Rhode Island, and is also, I just read on LinkedIn, the finalist for the 2021 Blockchain Research Institute. So congratulations, Liz. And Liz is also a groundbreaker and trailblazer in blockchain in our state, and has a great story to tell. And Liz, I'd love to introduce you now to share your Rhode Island story, and then we can have a conversation with the rest of the team here. Liz?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about the great things that are happening in Rhode Island. It's quite an honor to be on this panel with so many great executives and thought leaders in the blockchain space. So I've been asked to kind of explain how the state of Rhode Island got to this place and where blockchain fits into our journey. And so I'll explain that how I came to be. I'm not a super technical person. It's a joke in the office that I don't know how to change my password on my computer, but yet I've become the blockchain expert of the state, right? So there's a real big distinction between the two things there. But I'm an attorney by trade, and I have spent many of my years working up corporate clients and opened up 350 businesses myself personally, and was very frustrated with how hard it was to do business in the state. And so when now Commerce Secretary, then Governor Gina Raimondo was running for office, she talked about offering up a concierge level service for businesses. And I said, I want that job. So long story short, I worked really hard and talked to a bunch of people, and I did get that job. And so that's been my focus. And so I said, all right, well, if Rhode Island is constantly dinged for not having a good business environment, let me find a state that does it better. So I looked at every other state to say, okay, who is able to process the transactions of opening a business and whatever business has to do better than Rhode Island? And I didn't find anybody, like literally not on any other state really did it very well. I looked at some counties and some cities, and I thought Utah had some cute things. Philadelphia had some good things. Those are really the only, North Carolina had some things, but those were really the only places that had something that I found impressive that could really work. and deal with the problems that I had suffered as an attorney of these 350 clients. And so I started looking internationally, and I discovered Estonia and what Estonia is doing. I was really impressed with how they had centralized things. I actually became an e-resident so that I could try to understand more about it. And we really took a deep dive at my department to say, what is happening there and what can we do to make things better? So that was right about when Estonia started saying that they were using blockchain technology. And I said, I don't know what this blockchain thing is. Let me figure it out. And it's funny because I was listening to Jason talking about, what is blockchain? And I get asked that question all the time. And the way I explain it to people is, if you really want to understand how an email gets from one computer to another, that's not what you're trying to do, right? Like, and if you're trying to understand blockchain, I spent way too much time trying to understand, how it actually worked. And I realized that it was going to be far more valuable for me to think about how you use it and what are the use cases that you can do with it. So at the Department of Business Regulation, we did take a look at the crypto side, and we did create a singular license for anybody who wanted to use crypto, because we had multiple licenses if you wanted to get in that space. So we streamlined that process. But then we also said, how can we use this technology from the state side to make it easier, which was what I had worked on so much. So we put out an RFP. This was a couple of years ago. As you can imagine, blockchain, the pandemic has slowed down everything. But we put out an RFP a couple of years ago asking for how can you improve government services using blockchain technology. We had over 60 ideas from over 30 vendors, unheard of. We've never had that kind of a response in state government. And so we whittled down and we chose one project with one partner. And we have been working on digital credentialing for CPAs. If you flip to this next slide, sounds the most boring thing ever, but it's using a digital identity. So we believe that we are the only state in the country that is using a digital identity to create credentials. And again, we're starting with something boring because state government gets very nervous about these things. We wanted to make sure that everybody could get used to the concept, understand how it works. And so we are piloting this right now, where it's actually working to get this over the finish line. Matter of fact, we're looking for CPAs who have a real ID and an Android phone, so we can have them test this out. We will ultimately switch to the Apple products, but right now we're focused on the Android. And so you can see here really what it does. The traditional identity process was quite lengthy and quite cumbersome, not just for the applicant, but for the state. We had to have a lot of hands in the pot to make sure that somebody was who they said they were, to verify their credentials, to look at everything that they needed to do to become an accountant. And now we've created this far more simplified version of it. And you can see really what we're trying to do to simplify it, to keep the data in one place, using distributed ledger technology. And we would really like to expand it once it's proven. So, I think of it as a wheel with the digital identity being in the center and then having just many, many spokes on that wheel. And so right now we're hoping to have this CPA credentialing for our first spoke on the wheel, but all of you are writing things in the chat and other use cases that are possible. We talked about phishing licenses. Wouldn't it be great if you could prove who you are once and only once, put that information into the system and then have it all in one place? So I talked about, my name is Elizabeth M. Tanner, Esquire, but whatever form I fill out, it might be Elizabeth Tanner, Elizabeth M. Tanner, Elizabeth Mary Tanner, Elizabeth Mary Tanner, Esquire, right? And when you throw all of those things in there, that creates so many problems for state government because we're not sure if you're Liz Tanner or you Elizabeth Tanner, right? And so it really makes it simplified to have all this information in one place. You can verify your identity and then you do more and more. So we're very excited to expand this in Rhode Island and have been talking to lots of other governments. They have been interested in learning more about this and what they can do. And we'd really like to copy, to a certain extent, the Estonia model. We've seen what's happening in other provinces in Canada, as well as some other countries, particularly in the Mideast. But this has been an exciting project for us. There have been lots of other states that have done smaller projects, but we're hoping to have a real soup to nuts, start, finish, be able to do everything in one place. We know this is a many-year, long-term project, but when it's done, it's going to be really amazing. So that's what I was here to present today. If there's any questions for me.
Thank you so much, Liz. And then now we are at the point where I'd love to open it up to our audience for questions, and we'll start with folks on the panel. But please post your questions in the chat. And as we've gone through the last hour and 20 minutes, We've sort of set us up for familiarity with blockchain. We've established the why, and the why is about trust, and it's about provenance, identity, and tokenization. We've talked about what. We've talked about where is this happening, right? What are the use cases that we've seen? What projects do we have going on in the state? What challenges are we facing as we're endeavoring into this to the use of a blockchain? And then Liz is rounding us out with a very specific use case in the state government, which I think is so fascinating because it's to me, looking at this is real low-hanging fruit, right? When Liz first told me about this, she said it was a deliberately boring process, and that makes complete sense from a business perspective. Make this work in a deliberately boring process, so then you can scale it up and get the excitement. So I think we've set the stage, we've set our table for a good conversation here. Why don't I open it up to Anouk and Liz and any of the questions we have. So Anouk, any questions for Liz or vice versa?
Yeah, so Liz, very exciting work that you're doing with the state of Rhode Island. And I do have a question. So when you talk to other states about the work that you're leading and what you expect to achieve, what is their reaction and what are you seeing?
You know, honestly, there's a little bit of jealousy in the beginning, which I'm of course happy and proud to offer that up. You know, so the fact that we even started this before the pandemic, you know, I think a lot of people have said, oh, well, now we see the value. Now we understand that we need to get away from paper products and move to, you know, a far more organized electronic system that connect with each other rather than every single state agency has their own things. You know, we did a project to determine how to open up a restaurant in Rhode Island, and we realized that it was 13 different websites would have to be encountered, you know, and so again, whether you're putting in Elizabeth Tanner or Liz Tanner, with the Esquire or without the Esquire, you know, all of those things, you know, they create opportunities for problems. And so the other states have said to us, how do you think you can do this? And it's interesting because now that there's some dollars available, I think they're all starting to think about how this could make things better.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time when folks can kind of see the power in real life examples. And it's good to be the trailblazer. So congratulations, Liz.
Thank you.
Can't hear more about how this progresses. I do have maybe one other question that comes to mind is, you know, we've all talked about, you know, blockchain and Liz, it's interesting that you say that you're not a technical person. I'm too not, you know, technical. I do have a lot of my technical experts on the line today as well, but it's really about tackling business problems and driving client outcomes. That's really what it's about, right? And there's technology behind the machine that makes it happen and facilitate that work. What I would like to see is, why is blockchain, in your mind, a better approach to tackle some of these problems that you're seeing? And what do you see is next?
You know, first I'll say that I tend not to use the word blockchain that much because it scares people, you know, so they think of crypto, they think of, you know, some stories that you see in the headlines. And so I spend a lot more time saying things like digital identity, digital government, singular gateway, one-stop shop, you know, things like that. You know, I think, you know, every politician I've ever talked to says, I want a one-stop shop, you know, and the answer is there isn't a way to do it except for, you know, what we're attempting to do in Rhode Island. So first and foremost, I think there's a need to explain. And if somebody does know something about blockchain, I still will try not to say blockchain and instead will try to use the term distributed ledger and explaining that. But, you know, from a government perspective, what's most appealing to me is the prevention of fraud and the simplifying of data, right? So like I said, with all of the ways that my name could come out, it's the same thing with a business, right? So when you call yourself, you know, the best restaurant, sometimes it's best restaurant, sometimes it's the best restaurant. And that too does the same thing, you know, so we want to try to simplify a way so that you have all this information in one place, that it's immutable, that it can't be changed, that we can track it, that we have everything in one place. You know, state government has to pay for all those papers to be stored somewhere. We have to pay for all those electronic files to be stored somewhere. If we can put it on the blockchain, it's going to make it a whole lot more simple. You know, another thing to think about is the unemployment fraud that you saw during the pandemic. We think that what we're doing in the state of Rhode Island would have completely prevented all the fraud that took place, not just in Rhode Island, but every state, to the tune of billions of dollars, was being able to be stole because you couldn't prove your identity and what you were doing within the system. So that the fraud and the simplification of data, those are probably the two biggest reasons. Of course, there's a dollar reason. It's funny. I talked to a lot of the vendors, and they put forward these presentations and they use all these big words that I don't understand. Right? I'm a government person. I'm an attorney. Some of this high tech speak isn't in my language. And so when you're presenting to the government groups, it's really helpful for me to see metrics and data that says, I'm going to save this much money, or I'm going to need, to a certain extent, this many fewer employees that I could use for other things, that it's going to have this kind of improvement for the society, whatever it might be. And so, those are all really important. Those are things that we care about in government. We're not making money, so it's a little bit different, but we do want to save money. That's for sure, right? Because we need to use those dollars someplace else because we're always struggling. So those are just a couple of thoughts. I hope that answers the full question.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that my team and we've been talking about is how do we take blockchain out of blockchain? Because if you talk about the word blockchain, it opens up so many questions. But if you really kind of talk about the business problems and the business outcomes that we are geared to solve, then it makes the discussion just so much easier because it's really about tokenization, identity, and provenance. And it's about building trust and transparency around data. And if you have the conversations at that level, it makes it so much easier. So thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more with your assessment.
So I'm just randomly picking in, and I'll have Tina and others help me sort of make sure that we capture all the questions here. But when I randomly jumped into the chat here, it rounded out the grammar of this whole talk, which was great. We talked about the why, we talked about the what, we talked about the where, and now Lissandro is asking about the how. So our companies and organizations, so this is for Jason, Anouk, and Liz, and we can really open this up. Are companies and organizations that are researching blockchain looking more into building their own blockchain networks or using currently existing systems such as building an Ethereum layer 2 network? So Anouk or Jason, do you want to see that when we're, or even Liz, as you're seeing this in I know that you're working with a vendor to build a bespoke one for the state, but what are we seeing in the industry so far?
Yeah, I would say what I've seen is I've seen a combination of both. There is a power of when you have networks of networks and you have companies tap into existing networks. But in certain cases, there are cases where we're having to drive and build their own network as well. It just kind of depends on the use case and what problem we're trying to solve. So it would vary, and that we can kind of look at what makes sense. But anytime you can kind of leverage an existing network, that's a way to go. But sometimes that's just not the option.
And Liz, you're in Rhode Island, you're using a dedicated blockchain for the state?
We are, that was something we talked about to try to understand that. But from a state security system, again, doing something boring, you want to make sure it's the most safe and secure. Nobody wants a bad IT project in their state. So we tried to do what we thought was the safest way.
Got it. Yep. Tina, can I ask, are you seeing themes of questions that are popping up here?
Well, some specific questions. So do you foresee real estate transactions to be settled this way as well from start to finish? Is that somewhere you're thinking about going?
It's interesting. I'm actually a former real estate attorney. I was in the title insurance business myself before even my own law practice. So I have seen many, many applications that could take place in the entire real estate process. It's one of those things, I'd be afraid my title insurance company that I used to work for would go out of business, right? If you have all the land records on there. So there's a lot of applications that can be there. My goal right now is focused singularly on this digital identity piece and adding spokes to the wheel. It would really depend on many other things, but I'd really rather get a lot more spokes on that wheel first.
I think, Stephen, that might just be, there's a bunch that kind of support that whole idea about the driver's license and the ID. So it's kind of tracking with the conversation. I'm not seeing anything.
I saw one from Chris Shriver. Can the panelists, so Liz and Anouk, can we talk about the change management aspects associated with blockchain adoption? And are there any best practices that you're seeing? Want to start with Anouk?
Yeah, and actually I would like maybe Peter Borgo, maybe you guys have some perspective from the team that you want to share and some best practices on some specific projects that you worked on that may be more relevant. Any that you guys want to share before I jump in?
So I want to understand the context of change management as is being asked in the question. I mean, you're looking at, you have a version of application that actually is successful and you have information on the blockchain, and now you want to modify or enhance that application. How do we do? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think it's that, and so I think of change management around the IT support for it, but also the user community and the business users, business process wise. So both those aspects.
Yeah, so as we all know, Anouk and Jason and everyone's telling, the information that you put on blockchain is immutable. That's where the programmed trust comes in, right? So one way to handle change management in the context of immutability would be you make your new application or a new version, number one, either backward compatible. Not always this is possible or desirable. So in case your new version, new release is not backward compatible, then you will handle the difference or the enhancements with a version managed blockchain. So those are two big things. Either you enhance your application in a way it will work with the previous version. That's one approach. The other approach is you definitely break the backward compatibility, but you'll make sure that you have a migration strategy or a portability strategy. But clearly anything that you want to modify or you want to delete or you have a right to erase, typically we will not put that on a blockchain. So I think those are best practices, and all those will help you reach your business outcomes.
Thank you very much. I have a question, if I may. So I mentioned at the very top of our discussion here about why this moment in time is a great place to be innovating in Rhode Island. And at a completely different event from this on blockchain, I was actually at URI earlier this week on a workshop around quantum computing, another really exciting, innovative topic. And Senator Jack Reed was there. And one of the things Senator Reed talked about was this opportunity to be in a leadership position, and for Rhode Island to take advantage of this moment in time when the velocity of transformation is so great. Liz, you're leading the way here with blockchain at the state. So for the entrepreneurs on the call, for industry on the call, why Rhode Island? Why now, and why Rhode Island?
That's easy, right? So first and foremost, location. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I actually just finished a journey where I rode my bike at least 10 miles in all of Rhode Island's 39 municipalities. And wow, what a diverse state in this tiny little box. But the location is incredible, between what Rhode Island does have to offer itself, but being right between Boston and New York, we have access and ease of flow to get to those folks. It's the college graduates that are pumping out of all of the colleges. There's a lot of colleges in a very small state, as well as incubators, whether it's RISUW, and we have many other incubators and opportunities for resources for small businesses in the state, especially those who are starting. And in a small state like Rhode Island, everybody knows everybody. And while that has pros and cons, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it's really easy to connect with people. So if I can't tell you how many times I'll get a phone call. Somebody told me that you know something about blockchain, right? So just last week, I got a call from somebody at URI, and they were working on some energy thing that I have nothing to do with energy. And they said, but you understand blockchain, and I don't know anything about it, and I've been asked to understand it. And so we had a call, and we kind of went through some things for them, and it was really interesting. But that's what happens in a small state. For example, one of the things that we hear a lot about is a regulatory sandbox. And I spend a lot of time saying, okay, let's pass legislation to create a regulatory sandbox. Let's see what Rhode Island needs to do to have that opportunity. And I got to tell you, when we sat down and looked at our existing law, we already have it. Rhode Island already has an existing sandbox. That's the way it's always been in Rhode Island. So our laws were just built in that way that we have that flexibility. So we do have businesses that come to us and say, I'm going to try something totally different. And I might need to be regulated. I might not need to be regulated, but I'm not quite sure. Can you kind of work with me? And we do have those opportunities in a state like Rhode Island, whether it's at my agency, the Department of Health, other state agencies. We do have, most of us have that flexibility to say, all right, you want to try something different? All right, we're gonna give you a short leash, and we're going to do it for, 6 months, a year, 2 years, depending on what it is that you're doing. And then we're going to see what happens, right? Is it really a problem? If it's not a problem, we're probably going to let you go without any kind of regulation. But if there is problems that arise or there's things that we're worried about, well, then we're going to work with you and we're going to try to set up these regulations so that you have it. So Rhode Island does have a regulatory sandbox. Most states do not. Other states have had to create it. But we do have that flexibility, and that NOAA guy, again, has pros and cons. But from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it's a good way. You just need to call them and call us, and we're going to sit down with you and we're going to work it out. And that's what we did with the crypto space a couple of years ago when that was really becoming a big deal. And we sat with them and we said, okay, how do we make this better? And we did. We changed the law. We created a singular license and a streamlined application process so that they didn't have to go through something, because we didn't have that for that. So Rhode Island's really a fabulous place. If you have any questions, you should absolutely feel free to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to find you somebody who can. So thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity for me to plug Rhode Island.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Liz. It's a great opportunity and a great audience to hear that message, because we've got a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business leaders here. So thanks for that. Let me see that we have another question from Stephen here. Are we in a position to become an incubator state to mass market blockchain companies to operate in Rhode Island, be like the Silicon Valley realm for crypto companies?
That's why we're here, right? Like this is what we're trying to introduce this to a lot of folks. I know there's a lot of other states that are looking at doing this. Everybody's seeming to take their angle from it. I spent a lot of time talking to the folks in Wyoming. I know that they feel very strongly about crypto and they've been trying to do a lot there. I haven't really seen many other states put things out on the forefront, but from a distributed ledger side, yeah, Rhode Island would really love to take the lead, because we'd really like to implement this more and more across all of state government. And once you introduce it and you can prove that it's safe and secure and it's as great as we all know it is, then you're going to have a lot more folks who are interested in using it for other use cases.
It's interesting. Thank you for the question, Stephen. I was talking to a client the other day about this, and I was sharing my thoughts on this presentation that we were going to do. And my colleague at this client said, blockchain's confusing because when you say crypto, it's the Wild West, but when you say distributed ledger, it's trust, right? And it's all the same tech running the thing, but crypto, this is just crazy world, whereas distributed ledger means that you can actually do things in a trusted, immutable ledger. So it's interesting the way we talk about this and trying to separate out those two notions. Annette, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. And I could not agree with you more. It gets so confusing when you go to crypto. And that's the first thing people talk about. If you're kind of standing around talking to people these days, if you're doing that outside and you're talking about blockchain, the first thing they think about is money. And, you can kind of see the future of where it's all going. I think I'd like to really, personally wrap my mind around how do we do it? And I'm going to point to Liz and say, we would love to help Rhode Island become, I'll tell you the biggest strength for Rhode Island, and you guys kind of talked about it, is our size. The fact that we're small, we can get to anybody. We can get to Liz Tanner. Like, that's amazing. The Liz Tanner of other states, we probably couldn't get to them very easily. Yeah. And, the fact that you're with Jack Reed on Monday, that's our superpower. And so it seems like what that means to me is we can move faster than others. We don't have as much in between, all these other human beings that you might have like in a Texas or a California or wherever else. So and maybe we don't know today, but we would love to know what the steps are, because, we can get entrepreneurs together and business leaders together to actually make something happen here in Rhode Island. I've heard people say, we want to be what Delaware is to corporates. We want to be the blockchain, if there is such a thing here. And so, Liz, I don't know, is there a recipe or a process, or do you want us to create it?
So I'll tell you that when I spoke to, we spent a lot of time talking to folks in the crypto space, and this was four or 5 years ago now at this point. And they told us they were looking for the same things over and over again. First and foremost, staff. They needed young folks who were willing to learn how to do this kind of coding, and it was really, really hard for them. And what was even harder was to find a teacher to teach them, right? So there was no college programs at the time, or at least there was only one or two maybe in the country. And there's a whole lot more now, but they needed employees to do this work. And that was pre-pandemic, right? So it's going to be even harder to do it now. And teachers to teach them, because the teachers were making so much more money doing the coding that they didn't have time to teach, right? So it was one of those things. They're also looking for clarity of laws. They said that over and over and over again. We just want to know what our situation is, right? And so you're seeing some activity happening on the federal level. Maybe that'll start to sort itself out a little bit better, but they were looking for clarity of laws, hence us changing the law for the crypto space to make it more clear. So we did what we could from a state standpoint for blockchain at the time, but the feds still need to work out what their other piece was. And then also they kind of want to be together, so they want the incubation. They want to be together so that they can bounce ideas off each other, so they can share information. So those were the three things that we heard over and over and over again from those businesses. And, it was easy to fix well, I shouldn't say easy, because changing laws is never easy. But the incubator space, yes, they are looking at all trying to get together and looking for the employees to staff themselves up.
Well, so a couple things. In about an hour and a half, I forget what time it is now, about 12:30, talking about teaching it and understanding what's next. There is a session building on blockchain. We're lucky, very lucky in our state to have Arnell Millhouse, who's an expert in the blockchain, and he's going to talk about next level down, which is like, how do I do it? There was a question in the chat to Rhode Island to say, did we all in Rhode Island build our own blockchain, or are we using another blockchain? So concepts like that are big, good, important questions. If you can make it, and if you can't make it in an hour and a half, just sign up and it's all recorded and we'll send you the recording. But that building on blockchain. So having those folks around that can actually teach us, huge. And we'll work with our universities. RISUW is happy to be an incubator space for blockchain and entrepreneurs looking to do more in blockchain. And then we'll stay in close contact with you, Liz, in your office around, the clarity of law. Like, I don't even know if I was in the insurance industry and I wanted to create a blockchain, do I have legal issues at a state level? Do I have legal issues at a federal level? I don't even know, right? So I think that's where we are with this. Like we're just trying to figure out what the steps are. So thank you. All right, anybody have, let's see, I have a couple more messages here. To Pete saying to really help accelerate scale and interoperability, the state incubator can keep up with the pace of innovation. Does the state envision a multi-purpose, multi-jurisdictional platform approach? For example, how can a CPA license example help to rapidly extend to other businesses and regulated occupations? It's an interesting question.
That's a great question, because that's exactly what I'm working on right now, right? So it's going to be, I don't want to say easy, but it will be easy for me to add more spokes to the wheel from my state agency. But again, boring, because it's already within my department. I'm already 100% electronic. The beauty comes when I connect it with the Secretary of State's office and the Division of Taxation, and have the ability to essentially have my Social Security number used with my Liz Tanner versus Elizabeth Tanner all in one place, and then extending it to do other things. So the beauty comes when you start to add on other state agencies and ultimately combine them. So back to what I said about the restaurant, 13 different websites. Wouldn't it be beautiful, like if I could have everything in one place and I don't have to fill out the same forms over and over again, Liz Tanner, 123 Main Street, all that information is there. And now I'm just answering the questions specific to what I am applying for. So in Rhode Island, you have to have a special license to sell shellfish. And you notice I say that slowly because it's really hard to say. But there are a couple of questions related to shellfish that have nothing to do with my well water or the food certification of my chefs. But I have to answer those kinds of questions, right? But at least all the main information is in there, right? So creating that data bank that has it all there, and you have access and you have access and you have access to just what you need, but you don't have access to everything, right? So the Department of Health probably doesn't need my Social Security number, but the Division of Taxation does. So it's a matter of doing that all. So yes, it is The beauty starts to come into it when you start to put on not just, I talk about using fishing licenses next because Liz Tanner gets a fishing license and is a CPA. Like that's pretty simple stuff, but they don't really connect to each other. The beauty comes when they connect to each other and you've got the Secretary of State's office and the Division of Taxation. Now the magic really starts to happen because then you're really simplifying it from a much bigger perspective. So great question.
And then we had a really good conversation.
Oh, you got it in it? Yeah, okay.
With Stephen, who said, hey, why don't we place the government civil engineering projects, highway projects, building construction from the government on the blockchain? So we, you talk about trust and, sort of like clarity and making sure everybody is transparent. Interesting question.
Rhode Islander
question or a statement.
And I have to tell you exactly why, again, we're starting with something so boring because people are nervous, right? And if I'm Peter Alvidi, who runs the Department of Transportation, or Nellie Gorbet, who runs the Secretary of State, they got a million other things that they're worrying about and problems. I just saw the possibility and am hoping to get it started. But until it gets beyond my state agency, it's going to be really hard. So I have been working on talking to my colleagues to say, okay, can I get you interested in this? Can you see the benefit of this? And that's hard, right? Because you have to prove that it works and what the potential is before you can really get other people to come on board. But that's my challenge to work on. And I'm sure other states will have the same as well.
And I want to point out, we have all different types of people on this call. We have a sophomore in computer science from URI, Lissandro. Great. Thank you for being here. You're the kind of people we want to make sure gets ignited by this. And this is a person in computer science that actually is our future in terms of enabling these projects to happen. So, okay. And we really would love to be the Estonia of the states of the United States. We want to be the Estonia here in Rhode Island. So we're small enough. We should be able to do this. Anybody else have some thoughts? All right.
If not, if I just may say one last sort of closing thing, and then we can move on to the rest of the startup week. So my thanks to IBM and to Liz, to Jason and to Anouk and to Liz, and to all the great questions. Tina, thank you for helping me facilitate. What a cool discussion, right? We started out with just sort of what does it mean to chart your course in the state? And we went all the way through the why, the what, the where, the how. And had a really good, I think, engaging conversation and got it right down to the state and opportunities for us in the state. And now let me plug, if I may, Annette Tonti and RISUW to say, this is an asset and a resource in our state that everybody should be tapping into. RISUW is 4 years old. And this is a 2 years old. Sorry, I feels like 3. 2 years old. I am so proud to be a part of it. IBM is so proud to be a part of this. But this is an enormously valuable asset to the state and to business and to enterprise and to entrepreneurs, that is, to tap into not only moments like this, but to take these, to use Annette and to use RISUW to launch and to connect to other parts of the state, but also to launch your business in innovative technology like blockchain. So please take advantage of this really, really cool asset, which is RISUW. And with that, I'll turn it back to Annette to close us out.
All right. So it doesn't end here, folks. As Stephen pointed out, we're here. This has been recorded. You will get a recording of this. But as you have next generation questions, et cetera, go ahead and send them to us at RISUW. We'll be happy to answer them. We'll be happy to connect you up to the folks we know that can actually help you with whatever it is you need on the blockchain scenario. I hope you can join us at 12:30 when Arnell Millhouse is going to take us that next level down into like, how do I actually make this a reality and actually talk about technology quite a bit. So thank you, Stephen, Liz, Anouk, Tina, and let's see, who else am I missing? Yes, thank you. Thank you guys so much. And thanks to Jenny, who runs, she is our Zoom master extraordinaire for all of Startup Week. And thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Cool as a cucumber over there, Jenny is, with all the technology. Well done. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.